My name is Evelyn Hart, and I'm 33 years old. If you'd told the version of me who arrived in Seattle with a bus ticket and a garbage bag that one day she'd run a nonprofit called Homebase, she would have laughed, then cried, then asked if the beds were clean. Homebase is where 16 and 17-year-olds land when the state stops calling them children, but the world still treats them like problems. We help with deposits, IDs, jobs that pay more than tips and luck. It's not glamorous. The office carpet smells like steam cleaner and old coffee. The chairs don't match. But the keys we hand to kids are heavy with actual doors. 2 years ago, at a volunteer gala, I met Adrian Crow. He was the kind of beautiful that makes waiters forget other tables exist. Tailored suit, easy laugh, a way of listening that felt like he dimmed the rest of the room. He sold pharmaceuticals to hospital systems and knew how to make spreadsheets flirt. His family was old Seattle money. Father a radiologist, mother Laura, a corporate consultant who gave talks on empathy like it was a brand. I didn't grow up with brands. I grew up with case files and the word placement. Still, Adrian chose me, said I grounded him. I said he made me feel like reaching for something that wasn't survival. When he packed care kits in a Navy suit after a day with surgeons, I believed we were on the same road, just coming from different sides of town. I spent 6 months saving for a ring forged by a local metal artist, reclaimed steel, hammered soft around a lab diamond. Something broken made durable. I carried it for 2 weeks, waiting for a moment that felt like truth and not performance. Then came Daniel's condo party, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sound, the kind of view that makes every life below look like someone else's story. Adrian was buoyant, introducing me to pharma VPs whose cufflinks probably cost my monthly rent. I wore my one decent blazer that doesn't apologize for being off the rack. At 9, my phone lit with Marcus, 19, voice shaking. His roommate had bailed on rent. I slipped onto the balcony, where the wind could carry my reassurances into something like a promise. We'll figure it out Monday. I've got you, okay? When I came back inside, I cut through the hall. The kitchen door was half open. I didn't mean to stop. I didn't mean to hear. Inside, Adrian, Daniel, and a woman from regulatory I couldn't name. Their cheeks were flushed. Their whine was brave. Daniel grinned, asked loudly, performing for the room, for himself. If he proposed tomorrow, would you say yes? Adrian laughed. Not the laugh I knew. The other one. The one that belongs to men whose lives have always said, right this way. He's my stability era, he said. My fixer-upper phase. He's great for now, but I'm not marrying someone who still thrifts and drives a Corolla. Glass clink. Laughter like ice breaking. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a joke misheard through a wall. It was a sentence that had lived long enough inside him to learn to walk. The box in my pocket crushed my hip. The air thinned until it felt like a trick room. Same size, less oxygen. I turned and moved down the stairwell like a person remembering how to exit a building in a dream. In the car, I watched the steering wheel without seeing it. The phone trembled with Adrian's name. Then Daniel's. Where'd you go? Then, are you okay? Then, Ev? Hello? I let them stack like plates in a cabinet I knew would shatter. I got home. I put the ring in my sock drawer under a pair of folded wool. I slept like a person who had to audition for it. Morning found me on autopilot. I changed my emergency contact from Adrian Crow to Troy Whitaker, my foster brother, who still calls me kid, even though he's only 9 months older and now wears a tie to court. I drafted the email to Adrian's company, withdrawing Homebase from their CSR shortlist. $80,000 a year is enough light to make you forget how cold a room is, but I couldn't breathe under it anymore. Subject: Homebase, CSR proposal withdrawal. Body: due to personal conflicts of interest, we are stepping back from consideration this cycle. We appreciate your time. I stared at the cursor longer than anyone should stare at a blinking line. Then I hit send. At noon, Adrian walked into Homebase's glass front lobby in a suit the color of expensive storms. He looked like he'd been crying and tried to smile anyway. Jen at the desk shot me a look. I gave her the smallest nod. Why did you leave? He asked once my office door closed. Why are you pulling the grant? Because I heard you, I said. My voice surprised me by staying human. In the kitchen. Color left his face like a tide. Ev, no, Daniel was... Did you mean to say it, or did you mean to believe it? I asked. There are moments you can sell, and then there are moments you can only pay for. He opened his mouth for the pitch and found nothing on the shelf. It's not the words, I said finally. It's the spine they came from. He nodded like people nod at bad news about someone else. Can we talk later? We just did. He left. I could see his reflection in the glass as he passed Jen, a man walking inside a version of himself he didn't recognize. 2 days later, my phone rang. Evelyn, this is Laura Crow. Wine clung to her syllables, polished and sour. You've done wonders for Adrian's empathy. Please don't throw that away over something silly. It isn't silly, I said. It's what he believes. Silence through which I could hear the kind of house that doesn't creak. Then, truth is, dear, he's afraid of struggle. You represent struggle. That isn't his fault. I hung up. The sentence nested in my chest like a shard. You represent struggle. I'd spent 15 years turning struggle into work, and then into keys, and then into beds. Suddenly, it was a costume I'd somehow worn wrong to the party. The email from the company arrived the following week. Budgetary reallocations. CSR postponed indefinitely. I printed it out and slid it into a folder labeled Losses. And that night, to plug the hole I'd cut in my own ship, I signed up to drive rideshare. Homebase doesn't run on pride. It runs on rent. The first week behind the wheel tasted like old coffee and mint gum and relief I could count. People climbed in saying addresses like Spells, Fremont, Ballard, Wallingford, and I followed the map because it's the only voice that never asks you to be more impressive than you are. Adrian texted long paragraphs that started as apologies and softened into reasons. I was drunk. They were teasing me. I'm not that guy. Then he started appearing. At my morning coffee place, at the steps of my walk-up just before sunrise, at home base during lunch with a paper bag and hopeful eyes. The morning he looked hollow enough to see through, I stopped on the stairs. You can't keep doing this, I said. You need to move on. I don't know how to move on from the only thing that ever felt real, he said, voice raw from unpracticed honesty. You didn't just say something cruel, I said. You told the truth you live by when you think no one is listening. Across the street, Mrs. Park balanced groceries and watched us like she was counting bruises, and I hated that I looked like the person causing them. Later, driving a man to the airport who never looked up from his phone, I kept seeing the kitchen, the angle of Adrian's wrist, the careless grace of people who never had to measure their words for rent money. I kept hearing Laura, you represent struggle, and somewhere under the engine and the wipers, and a rain that made the city a smear of lights, something inside me said, I represent keys. The ring stayed in the sock drawer. The box didn't get lighter. I did. When I was 16, my caseworker told me that survival was a skill until it becomes a habit you can't turn off. Back then, I thought she meant hunger. I didn't know she also meant love. It's been 2 weeks since the party. 2 weeks since Adrian's laugh split my future into before and after. At home base, we lost the $80,000 CSR partnership because I refused to let our organization be someone's tax write-off for guilt. I didn't tell the staff why. I just said the company restructured priorities. Jen believed me, or pretended to. Rent's due on the office. We had plans for new furniture and a counselor. Gone now. I picked up extra rideshare shifts, 8 p.m. to 2 a.m., because my conscience doesn't pay invoices. Still, I kept hearing Laura's voice. You represent struggle. It played on loop between GPS directions. Struggle, the way she said it, like it was contagious. One night around 11, I drove a drunk woman home from a rooftop bar. She was wearing a designer dress that cost more than my week's wages and crying because her fiancé bought the wrong flowers. You ever love someone who made you feel small? She asked. Yes, I said quietly. Did you stay? No. She smiled through mascara. Then you're already ahead of me. When I parked, she tipped me $100. I almost gave it back, but she whispered, You look like you needed to win one tonight. Maybe she was right. The confrontation. 3 days later, Adrian came to the office again. No appointment this time, just walked in like he owned air. Jen texted me. He's here. He waited in the conference room, still wearing the same cologne, still looking like a memory I hadn't deleted yet. I can't lose you over something I didn't mean, he started. You did mean it, I said. You just didn't mean for me to hear. He flinched. Ev, I was performing. Everyone does it sometimes. You know what those people are like? Judgmental, privileged. You're one of those people. That shut him up. He stared at the table. You make me want to be better. You should want that even if I never existed. He reached for my hand. I stepped back. Don't make this harder, I said. I can't keep fixing men who think they're the project. He looked broken in a way that almost made me forget why I had to stay standing. Almost. The call from Laura. That night, as I was closing up the office, my phone rang again. Private number. Evelyn, it's Laura Crow. I sighed. Mrs. Crow, it's late. I wanted to apologize for earlier. I shouldn't have minimized your feelings. I didn't respond. She continued. You must understand. Adrian's afraid of failing. You represent that fear. There it was again. Represent. I wanted to laugh. He's afraid of failing because he's never had to. Exactly, she said. He's terrified of struggle because he's never survived it. You have. That's why he loves you. Love? The word landed like a stone in wet earth. If that's love, I said, it's not the kind I can live on. When I hung up, I felt something uncoil inside me. Maybe I didn't represent struggle. Maybe I represented proof that comfort and character weren't synonyms. The consequence. 2 weeks later, the email came from Adrian's company. Due to internal reallocations, we regret to inform you that the CSR grant has been postponed indefinitely. I didn't need a translator to know what that meant. He'd told someone. They'd listened. We were cut. When I read it aloud, Jen went still. 80,000? I nodded. Her eyes watered. We can't survive that. We'll find a way. But I didn't tell her that finding a way meant driving until dawn, grabbing 2 hours of sleep, and showing up to work pretending I hadn't been a ghost in someone's back seat. Every night, the dashboard clock turned from 1:59 to 2 honk, while I drove strangers through rain-glossed streets. A man in a suit fell asleep mumbling about bonuses. A college girl vomited glitter into a napkin. Life, in all its strange shades of loneliness, filled my car, and somehow I felt less alone with them than I ever had with Adrian's friends. The street encounter. One morning I spotted Adrian waiting near my apartment steps. It was barely 7, fog lifting off the pavement. He looked like he hadn't slept. Ev, please, he said. I can't eat. I can't think. I made a mistake. I crossed my arms. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. I was drunk. You were honest. He blinked back tears. You don't understand. That night, I understand perfectly. You wanted to sound like the man they'd respect, not the man I loved. He crumbled right there, on the concrete, and for a moment I almost reached for him. But pity isn't love. It's debt disguised as kindness. Mrs. Park passed by again, same as before, her grocery bag swinging like a metronome. Her look said, Why are you doing this to him? Because he already did it to me. The spiral. By week 5, I was barely sleeping. Marcus noticed first. You look dead, Ms. Hart, he said gently, leaning against the home base doorway. I'm fine. No, you're not. You can't keep fixing everyone. You're gonna break. I smiled tiredly. Maybe I'm already cracked, Marcus. That's why I fit the job. That night, as I drove through Queen Anne Hill, I saw the skyline glinting like a promise and thought about that ring in my drawer, how it had been made from reclaimed metal, something broken turned lasting. But I couldn't tell if I was the metal or the hammer anymore. I kept driving until the sun smeared across the water, until exhaustion blurred grief into routine. And when the GPS said you have arrived, I parked and whispered, No, not yet, because I hadn't, not even close. There's a rhythm to pain. At first it's sharp, unpredictable, catching you off guard in line at the grocery store or during a client meeting. Then it dulls, becomes part of the background, like the hum of a refrigerator you forget is there until it stops. 3 months after the party, I thought the hum had finally quieted. Then Laura Crow showed up at my office unannounced. The visit. She brushed past Jen like she owned the hallway. Expensive heels, posture straight enough to slice air. Mrs. Crow, you can't just walk in here, I said, standing from behind my cluttered desk. I won't take long. She sat anyway. Adrian's mother had the kind of face that had practiced elegance until it calcified. But today, there was something brittle in her eyes. Adrian's falling apart, she said. He's lost weight. He's missing work. He's facing consequences, I interrupted. She exhaled, frustration mixing with pity. He made a careless comment because he's terrified. You remind him of me. I frowned. Excuse me? When I was 30, she said, voice dropping, I married his father because he was safe. Good family, steady income. I told myself love would come later. It didn't. Adrian grew up watching me pretend. When he looks at you, he sees everything I was too afraid to want. I stood there frozen. This wasn't the conversation I signed up for. She smiled sadly. So when he called you his stability phase, what he really meant was that you made him feel stable for the first time, and that terrified him. Then he should have said that instead of trying to humiliate me, I replied. Fear makes people cruel, she whispered. So does privilege. She didn't argue. She just nodded, eyes glassy, and left. Her perfume lingered. Too polished, too deliberate. And for a few minutes, the office felt smaller, like her words had filled the oxygen. The message from Troy. That evening, I was sorting receipts when my phone rang. Ev, it's Troy, my foster brother said. I just got a weird call from Adrian. I stopped breathing. Why would he call you? He said he wants to meet you, somewhere public. Says it's important. Sounded scared. Scared. That word didn't fit Adrian. He was the type who delivered bad news with champagne confidence. Fine, I said, but you're coming with me. Already planned on it. The cafe? Pike Street smelled like espresso and rain that couldn't make up its mind. We sat near the back, facing the window. Adrian arrived 5 minutes late. I barely recognized him. His designer polish was gone. The man who used to sell confidence for a living now looked like he'd pawned it. Thank you for coming, he said, voice hoarse. Troy leaned forward. You said this was urgent? Adrian nodded. It is. He took a shaky breath. I found out last week that I'm infertile. The doctors call it congenital azoospermia, means I can't have biological children. My mom knew about it. She just never told me. The words hung there, fragile as glass. I didn't know what to do, he continued. I thought maybe you should hear it from me, not someone else. I stared at him, stunned. Of all the possible reasons for this meeting, that wasn't on the list. I'm sorry, I said softly. He shook his head. Please, let me finish. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small leather notebook, edges frayed, pages bent. My therapist told me to write. I started after the breakup. It's every ugly thought I've had about us, about myself. I need you to read it. He slid it across the table like evidence in a trial. Adrian, I don't need your confessions, I said. Yes, you do. Because you think I said those things because I don't respect you. But the truth is worse. The truth. Troy's eyes flicked between us, uneasy. Adrian's hands trembled around his coffee cup. When I was with you, I felt small. You do real work. Kids depend on you. I sell pills to hospitals that don't even remember my name. You have purpose. I have profit. He swallowed hard. So I told people you were beneath me, because deep down I thought I was beneath you. The cafe went quiet, except for the hiss of the espresso machine. I stared at the notebook. The first page was dated 3 days after the party. I told Evelyn I did not mean what I said, but I did. I meant it because I'm a coward who needs to feel superior just to breathe. Page after page, raw, messy handwriting, thoughts unraveling in ink. She builds homes. I build narratives. She's necessary. I'm replaceable. I don't know how to be loved by someone who doesn't need saving. By the third page, my throat burned. I can't forgive you, I said finally. Not right now. Maybe not ever, but I believe you. He nodded. That's fair. I slid the journal back. You should keep this. He pushed it toward me again. I wrote it for you. The pages smelled faintly of ink and something human, regret, maybe. We stood. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still shimmered with leftover storm. For what it's worth, he said, voice cracking, I really am sorry, for all of it, for making you feel like you weren't enough when you were the only thing that ever felt real. He walked away into the Pike Street crowd, vanishing the way people do when you finally let them go. That night, I read every page. Some made me furious. Some made me ache. Most just made me sad. For him, for me, for all the things people destroy because they're afraid to be seen. When I closed the notebook, I realized forgiveness wasn't something you gave. It was something you stopped chasing. And for the first time in months, I slept. Not deeply, but enough. 6 months after the party, life felt like it had settled into an uneasy rhythm again. Days at home base, nights behind the wheel, and weekends spent hunting for small grants that might keep the lights on. The ache had dulled. Not gone, but quieter. Then came the fundraiser, the event. We'd spent weeks preparing. Jen had triple-checked the slide deck, the kids were rehearsing their speeches, and I'd borrowed a dress from a friend who said, "It's time you stopped dressing like you're apologizing for existing." The ballroom was a patchwork of secondhand centerpieces and cheap rented chairs disguised as something grander by candlelight. I stood at the podium, smiling through exhaustion, ready to convince a room full of strangers that kids aging out of foster care mattered more than their dinner reservations. For an hour, everything went right, until it didn't. The interruption, a commotion by the doors, then a voice I knew too well, sharp as glass. "That's her! That's the woman who ruined my son's life!" Every head turned. Laura Crow, in a sleek suit and expensive rage, stood pointing straight at me. The crowd froze. I heard a phone camera click. "You broke him," she shouted. "You humiliated him when he needed you most." "Mrs. Crow," I said from the stage, my microphone still on, "this isn't the place. You think you're better than him because you run some little charity in a crumbling building?" Her words sliced through the air like she'd practiced them in the mirror. "Adrian loved you. You were supposed to be his stability, and you left him." Security approached gently, but she wasn't finished. "He found out he can't have children, and where were you? Driving strangers around for cash? My God, you're not good enough for him. You never were." Someone gasped. Someone else recorded. I stood perfectly still, hands folded, voice calm. "You're right about one thing, Mrs. Crow. I wasn't good enough for the world you live in." Security led her out as murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jen looked pale. "Evelyn, oh my God, are you okay?" "No," I said, "but the kids still need rent money, so we finished the night." Aftermath. I gave my speech with a voice steady enough to fool everyone but me. Polite applause followed. Donors approached afterward, careful smiles, quiet kindness, pretending not to have witnessed the meltdown. But an hour later, my phone began to buzz. Once, twice, then nonstop. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Someone had posted a video of the entire confrontation. Wealthy consultant crashes nonprofit fundraiser to shame founder for not being rich enough. The caption read, "This is what classism looks like." Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. By morning, national outlets had picked it up. Comments poured in. The audacity. "Donate to Homebase. Let's turn her cruelty into their funding." I've been that not good enough girl. Never again. When I checked our donation page, it had crashed from traffic. By noon, strangers had donated $50,000. By evening, $80,000, the exact amount we'd lost from Adrian's company. I sat at my kitchen table, in pajamas, watching the numbers rise, tears running unchecked. Jen called at 7 a.m. "Ev, you're trending. Look." Struggle is strength is literally a hashtag. I laughed for the first time in months. Well, that's one way to pay rent. The call. That afternoon, my phone rang again. Adrian. I hesitated, then answered. "I saw the video," he said quietly. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know she'd do that. It's not your fault. She's horrified. My whole family is." "Good," I said. Then softer. "Adrian, you know what came out of it? We raised $60,000 overnight, maybe more, because people saw what privilege looks like when it's unmasked." He was silent for a long time. Then, "Maybe this is what you meant when you said we build different things." "Maybe," I said. "You sell hope in bottles. I build it from bruises." He almost laughed. "You always did know how to turn pain into purpose." "Not always," I admitted, "but I'm learning." We hung up quietly, without pretending it meant more than it did. The shift. By the end of that week, Homebase had raised $90,000, more than the lost grant, enough to cover counseling, rent, and expansion. News outlets called. Interviews followed. For once, people were listening. Laura's consultancy firm suspended her empathy speaking tour after the irony became too loud to ignore. And me? I drove through the city that night, not for extra cash, but because I wanted to see it. The skyline, the streets, the kids who now had keys because a woman's cruelty accidentally went viral for good. Life doesn't hand you justice. Sometimes it just hands you a microphone. And this time, I didn't turn it off. Almost a year later, I can finally say the words, "I'm okay," and almost mean them. Homebase is thriving. The viral video that once felt like humiliation became a lifeline. We've tripled funding, hired 2 counselors, a job placement coordinator, and opened a second location on the south side. 50 kids now have roofs, beds, and something close to normal. And yet, every time I walk through those doors, I still see the girl I was the night of that party, ring in her pocket, hope in her chest, about to learn the cost of illusion. The reunion. It happened quietly. An email from Troy. "Heads up. Adrian reached out. Says it's about work, not personal." My chest tightened, not from longing, but from curiosity. We met at the same Pike Street cafe where he'd once handed me that journal. He looked different, simpler. The expensive armor was gone. Jeans, a worn jacket, lines under his eyes that made him finally look real. He smiled, cautious. I left pharma. I'm working as a fundraising consultant for nonprofits now. I blinked. Really? He nodded. Your video changed everything for me. I realized how much money moves the world and how much good it could do if it actually went where it mattered. He slid a folder across the table. Proposal for a new initiative. Transitional housing for girls aging out of foster care. I want to help you build it. My instinct was to say no, to guard the peace I'd fought for. But as I read the outline, budget columns, zoning timelines, handwritten notes in the margins, I realized something. This wasn't about rekindling anything. It was about rebuilding something entirely new. I looked up. This is good work. He smiled faintly. It's your kind of work. No, I said. It's our kind of work, if you mean it. I do. And so we started, side by side, but never as we were, the project. The next 6 months were filled with endless calls, paperwork, and city permits that made me wonder if bureaucracy was just grief wearing a tie. Adrian showed up early, stayed late, didn't flinch when donors asked questions that once would have bruised his ego. He'd learned humility the hard way. Sometimes we met with Troy, sometimes just the two of us. We spoke mostly about logistics, sometimes about the kids, never about the past unless the conversation demanded it. One evening, after a long planning session, he looked at me across the cafe table. You ever think we could have made it work? I shook my head. We did make it work, just not the way we thought. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. There was no pain left in it, just acceptance. The opening. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was on a cool Saturday morning in Beacon Hill. The duplex was small, but bright. 6 bedrooms, 2 live-in coordinators, a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon rolls because Jen insisted it should smell like safety. The mayor gave a speech. Cameras flashed. Reporters asked for quotes. But my favorite moment came after the crowd thinned. A 16-year-old girl named Destiny, who had bounced between group homes for 3 years, ran her fingers along the windowsill and whispered, "It's mine?" I smiled. "It's yours." She threw her arms around me, nearly knocking me backward. That hug felt like the ending I didn't know I was waiting for. Across the yard, I saw Adrian talking quietly with donors. No spotlight, no need to perform. Just a man who had finally learned that purpose whispers where pride used to shout. He caught my eye, raised a hand in a small wave. I walked over. "You stayed in the background," I said. He shrugged. Didn't want to take credit that wasn't mine. Old you would have loved the cameras. Old me loved being seen. New me's fine being useful. We stood in silence, watching the girls explore their rooms. "Do you ever wish we could start over?" he asked softly. "No," I said, "but I'm glad we didn't end the wrong way." He smiled, a sad, peaceful kind. "Yeah, me too." The lesson. That night, I drove home past Queen Anne Hill, the same view where everything once cracked open. I thought about stopping, about looking at the city from the balcony where my world had ended, but I kept driving. Because some ghosts don't need closure, they just need distance. I used to think love was about being chosen. Now I know it's about choosing yourself, again and again, even when no one claps for it. Adrian will always be part of my story, but he's no longer the point of it. The point is the keys jingling in Destiny's pocket, the kids who no longer flinch when the heater turns off, the laughter echoing down hallways we built from what they tried to take from us. Sometimes the happy ending isn't the proposal or the reconciliation. Sometimes it's peace. Sometimes it's standing in the wreckage and realizing you built a home from it. And sometimes it's the quiet drive home, knowing you finally made it. Not to someone, but to yourself.